The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council stretched endlessly in all directions, its walls pulsing with soft blue light that reflected off Admiral Veldar's chitinous exoskeleton. His 6 legs carried him with practiced grace across the smooth floor as holographic displays materialized around the central command table. The images showed a small blue and green world spinning slowly in the darkness of space, orbited by a single gray moon. "Report, Commander," Veldar's voice buzzed through his translator, the mechanical tones echoing off the crystal walls. Commander Nixera stepped forward, her 4 compound eyes focusing on different data streams simultaneously. Her slender form moved with the fluid precision of her species as she manipulated the holographic controls with her upper set of arms while her lower arms held data tablets. "The target planet is designated Earth by its inhabitants," she began, her voice carrying the clinical detachment of a military briefer. "Third planet orbiting a yellow dwarf star in what they call the Sol system. The dominant species calls itself human, carbon-based bipedal creatures with an average lifespan of approximately 100 standard rotations." Veldar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for amusement among his people. 100 rotations? How do they accomplish anything meaningful in such a brief existence? "That appears to be part of their limitation, Admiral. Our deep space reconnaissance probes have been monitoring their electromagnetic emissions for several cycles. Their technology is primitive at best. They still rely primarily on chemical propulsion for space travel and have only recently established permanent settlements on their largest moon and the 4th planet in their system." The holographic display shifted to show crude human spacecraft, bulky, inefficient designs that burned chemical fuel and required multiple stages just to escape their home planet's gravity well. Veldar studied the images with growing confidence. The human vessels looked more like the ancient rockets his own species had used thousands of years ago during their early space exploration phase. "Their weapons systems?" he inquired. "Laughably outdated," Nixera replied, manipulating the display to show human military installations. "Kinetic projectile weapons using chemical propellants. Nuclear weapons of primitive fusion and fission designs. No energy shielding detected on any of their installations or vessels. No plasma weaponry, no gravitational manipulation, no quantum entanglement communication networks. They appear to communicate across interplanetary distances using simple radio waves." Veldar's thorax vibrated with what his species considered laughter. The Zephyrian Empire had perfected plasma weaponry that could slice through solid rock like it was nothing more than morning mist. Their gravitational manipulation technology allowed them to create artificial black holes for mining operations and move entire asteroids with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Their psychic network connected every Zephyrian military unit across light years of space, allowing for coordination that made their fleets move like extensions of a single vast organism. "Any signs of advanced defensive capabilities?" "None whatsoever, Admiral. Their orbital installations appear to be primarily scientific or commercial in nature. No evidence of planetary defense grids, no force fields, no quantum barriers. They seem to have divided their military forces among their various nation-states rather than presenting a unified defense structure." This information pleased Veldar immensely. Divided enemies were always easier to conquer. The Empire had learned long ago that species who could not unite even in the face of extinction rarely posed significant resistance to a determined conquest force. "Resource assessment?" Nixera's eyes shifted to a new set of data streams. "Highly favorable, Admiral. The planet shows abundant deposits of rare minerals essential for our industrial complexes. The biosphere appears remarkably stable and diverse, suggesting excellent potential for agricultural development. The gravity and atmospheric composition would require minimal terraforming for our colonization efforts." "And their strategic value?" "Exceptional. Earth's position places it along 3 major galactic trade routes. Control of the system would give us a forward staging base for expansion into the entire galactic arm. The economic advantages alone would justify the operation." Veldar moved around the holographic display, studying the blue world from multiple angles. The planet looked peaceful, almost inviting. White clouds swirled over green and brown continents, while vast blue oceans reflected the light of their yellow star. It seemed almost too easy. "Recommended force allocation?" Commander Nixera consulted her tablets before responding. "Standard pacification protocols suggest a full battle fleet for unknown civilizations. However, given the primitive nature of human technology and their apparent lack of unified command structure, I believe a minimal force would suffice. Perhaps 10% of our standard conquest fleet." 10%. Veldar considered this recommendation. The Empire's standard conquest fleet consisted of over 300 vessels, including massive dreadnoughts capable of bombarding entire continents and support ships that could establish orbital supremacy within hours of arrival. Even 10% of that force represented overwhelming firepower against a species that still used chemical rockets. I concur with your assessment, Commander. Signal the fleet commanders to prepare a pacification force. Include 2 dreadnoughts, 8 battle cruisers and appropriate support vessels. That should provide more than adequate firepower to encourage immediate surrender. Estimated timeline for complete pacification? Veldar's mandibles clicked again. Once the humans witness our technological superiority, I expect formal surrender within 3 of their local rotations. Possibly less if their leaders show any intelligence at all. The orders were transmitted across the Empire's psychic network within minutes, reaching fleet commanders hundreds of light-years away. Ships began moving toward predetermined jump points while ground forces prepared occupation equipment and administrative personnel readied conquest protocols that had been refined over decades of successful campaigns. Neither Veldar nor any member of his command staff thought to investigate why Earth's radio transmissions contained so many references to something called military history, or why humans seemed to spend so much time discussing warfare, conflict, and resistance against superior forces. That oversight would soon prove to be a catastrophic mistake. The bridge of the UEDF battleship Defiance hummed with quiet tension as Admiral Hyunwoo Kim watched the impossible sight unfolding on his view screen. Space itself seemed to tear open near Jupiter, creating swirling vortexes of light and energy that made his eyes water to look at directly. From these dimensional rifts emerged ships unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. The alien vessels moved with graceful, predatory elegance through the vacuum of space. Their hulls curved and flowed like living things, covered in what appeared to be organic armor that shifted and pulsed with its own inner light. Some ships were massive beyond comprehension, stretching for kilometers and bristling with weapon arrays that glowed with barely contained energy. Others were smaller but no less menacing, darting between the larger vessels like metallic sharks circling their prey. "Jesus Christ," whispered Navigator Sung-Ho Park, his voice barely audible over the electronic chatter filling the bridge. "How many of them are there?" Communications Officer Minjun Park worked frantically at his station, his fingers dancing across holographic controls as waves of data flooded his instruments. "Sir, I'm reading at least 30 major vessels, possibly more. Energy signatures are off the scale. Our computers can't even calculate their power output properly." Hyunwoo felt his stomach tighten as he watched the alien fleet arrange itself in perfect formation. Each ship moved with mechanical precision, taking up positions that spoke of centuries of military experience and tactical knowledge far beyond human understanding. These were not explorers or peaceful traders making first contact. This was an invasion force. "Distance to the fleet?" he asked, his voice steady despite the growing dread in his chest. 2 million kilometers and closing, sir. At their current speed, they'll reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. Tactical Officer Sujin Lee looked up from her displays, her face pale but determined. "Admiral, our long-range sensors are picking up energy weapons that make our plasma cannons look like firecrackers. Their smallest vessels are reading power levels equivalent to our entire lunar defense grid." The main view screen suddenly filled with static before clearing to reveal an alien face that would haunt human nightmares for generations to come. The creature appeared to be a fusion of insect and crystal, with 4 large compound eyes that glowed with inner light and mandibles that clicked together as it spoke. Its head was crowned with what looked like living crystal formations that pulsed in rhythm with its words. "Primitive species of the 3rd planet," the alien began, its voice rendered in cold, emotionless mechanical tones by the Universal Translation System. "I am Admiral Veldar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your world and all its resources now fall under our protection and guidance. You will immediately surrender all military assets and prepare your population for integration into our galactic civilization. Resistance is futile and will result only in unnecessary casualties among your people." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of electronic systems and the distant rumble of the ship's engines. Every human present understood they were witnessing a moment that would define their species' future. Hyunwoo felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on his shoulders as he considered his response. Lieutenant Sujin Lee leaned closer to him, speaking in a whisper that barely reached his ears. "Sir, preliminary analysis suggests we're facing technology at least 2 centuries ahead of our most advanced systems. Recommending immediate contact with Earth Command for surrender negotiations." Hyunwoo nodded slowly, but his eyes never left the alien commander's image. Humanity had spent decades preparing for this possibility ever since they had achieved faster-than-light travel and realized they were not alone in the universe. Politicians and military leaders had debated endlessly about what humanity should do if contacted by a superior alien civilization. The discussions always came down to the same fundamental question: would humanity choose survival through submission or death through resistance? The answer had been decided long ago, written into the very charter of the United Earth Defense Force and encoded into the hearts of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom among them. Admiral Veldar, Hyunwoo said, activating the communication channel with a steady hand. This is Admiral Hyunwoo Kim of the United Earth Defense Force, representing the sovereign planet Earth and all her colonies. Earth rejects your terms of surrender. If you want our world, you'll have to come and take it. The alien's four eyes seemed to widen in what might have been genuine surprise. For several seconds, Veldar said nothing, apparently processing a response he had clearly never expected to receive. You would choose certain extinction over peaceful integration into a superior civilization? The alien finally asked, his translator giving his words an almost incredulous tone. We choose freedom over slavery, Hyunwoo replied without hesitation. We choose dignity over survival. We choose to stand and fight rather than kneel and submit. This has always been humanity's way, and it always will be. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Within minutes, proximity alarms began wailing as the alien fleet accelerated toward the inner solar system. Hyunwoo immediately opened channels to every human military installation from the asteroid belt to Earth orbit. This is Admiral Kim to all UEDF forces. We are now at war. Implement Protocol 7 immediately. All civilian vessels are to evacuate to designated safe zones. All military personnel report to battle stations. Today we face an enemy that believes us weak and primitive. Let's show them what humanity is really made of. The first battle erupted 3 hours later near Europa Station, humanity's outermost military outpost. The human defenders fought with desperate courage against impossible odds, their outdated weapons barely scratching the alien ship's advanced armor. But when Commander Jae-hyun Cho's cruiser Seoul Pride lost all weapons and life support, he made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Instead of surrendering or retreating, Cho ordered his remaining crew to the escape pods and rammed his dying ship directly into the largest Zephyrian dreadnought at full speed. The explosion lit up Jupiter's clouds like a second sun and took both vessels into oblivion. Admiral Veldar stared at his tactical displays in complete bewilderment, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. By every logical measure, the humans had lost the engagement decisively. But somehow, watching that primitive ship sacrifice itself for no apparent strategic advantage, he felt as though the real defeat might belong to him. Commander Nixera sat in her private quarters aboard the Zephyrian command vessel, staring at data screens that showed information she could barely believe. 6 months had passed since what should have been a simple 3-day conquest of Earth. Instead, she found herself documenting the longest military campaign in Zephyrian history against what they had assumed was a primitive species. Her 4 compound eyes focused on different data streams simultaneously as she began her daily personal log, a practice she had started when the human behavior patterns became too strange to ignore. The soft blue glow of her quarters' bioluminescent walls pulsed gently around her as she spoke into the recording device. Personal log, Day 184 of the Seoul campaign, she began, her voice carrying notes of confusion that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. I must document another incident that defies all logical military doctrine. Earlier today, a heavily damaged human vessel designated Seoul's Pride encountered one of our disabled supply ships drifting toward Jupiter's gravity well. She paused to review the tactical footage on her screen. The human ship was clearly crippled, with hull breaches visible along its entire length and its engines barely functional. The Zephyrian supply vessel had taken damage from an asteroid impact and was slowly being pulled toward certain destruction by Jupiter's massive gravitational field. Standard military procedure would dictate that the human vessel preserve its remaining resources for escape or self-preservation, Nixera continued. Instead, Captain Dong Hyun-yoon used his ship's last fuel reserves to push our supply vessel clear of the gravity well, saving 23 Zephyrian lives at the cost of his own ship's mobility. The recording showed the human vessel's engines firing their final burst, nudging the Zephyrian ship to safety before going completely dark. The human crew had to be rescued by emergency shuttles, their own ship now helpless and drifting. When questioned during the prisoner exchange, Captain Yoon offered no strategic explanation for his actions. He simply stated, "It was the right thing to do." This response has been logged with 17 similar incidents over the past month. Nixera manipulated her controls to bring up another set of combat recordings. These showed a squadron of human fighter craft engaging a much larger Zephyrian force near the asteroid belt. By all tactical calculations, the humans should have immediately retreated to preserve their forces for future engagements. Instead, Major Eunji Kim had led her pilots in what could only be described as a controlled suicide attack. The human fighters had accelerated directly toward the Zephyrian vessels, firing their weapons until the very last second before ramming into the alien ships. But just before impact, each human pilot had ejected from their craft, turning their fighters into guided missiles while giving themselves a slim chance of survival. They sacrificed their equipment but preserved their personnel whenever possible, she noted. This suggests long-term strategic thinking despite apparent short-term recklessness. They understand that trained pilots are more valuable than replaceable ships. The most disturbing discovery was displayed on her third screen. Human engineering teams had been capturing Zephyrian technology and reverse engineering it at a rate that seemed impossible for such a supposedly primitive species. Dr. Young-Ho Lee's research facility had not only copied Zephyrian plasma cannon designs but had somehow improved upon them. Analysis of captured human weapons shows modifications that increase plasma coherence by 23% over our original specifications, she recorded, her voice tight with disbelief. They have taken our technology and made it better in a matter of weeks. Our weapons development cycles typically require years of testing and refinement. The implications were staggering. The Zephyrian Empire had built their military dominance on technological superiority. The idea that a primitive species could not only copy their weapons but actually improve upon them challenged everything she thought she knew about galactic civilization. Her fourth screen showed personnel records that told an even more troubling story. Squadron leader Insu Park had been shot down and captured 3 times in the past month. Each time, he had been exchanged for Zephyrian prisoners according to established rules of warfare. Each time, he had returned to combat in a newly improved fighter craft that incorporated lessons learned from his previous defeats. Park's first fighter was destroyed by our plasma grid targeting system, she documented. His second craft featured improved maneuvering thrusters that allowed him to evade our targeting computers. When that ship was disabled by our tractor beam weapons, his third fighter was equipped with beam disruption technology that rendered our capture systems ineffective. The pattern was repeated throughout the human military. Every defeat became a learning experience. Every tactical failure was analyzed, understood, and countered in subsequent engagements. The humans were not just fighting a war, they were evolving as a military force faster than the Zephyrians could adapt their own tactics. Most concerning is their psychological profile, Nixera continued. Other species we have conquered showed declining morale as military losses mounted. Humans exhibit the opposite behavior. Each defeat seems to strengthen their resolve rather than weaken it. They treat impossible situations as puzzles to be solved rather than reasons for surrender. She brought up casualty reports that painted a grim picture for both sides. Human losses were severe, but their recruitment rates had actually increased as the war continued. Young humans were volunteering for military service in numbers that exceeded their ability to train and equip them. Meanwhile, Zephyrian forces were beginning to show signs of psychological strain from prolonged combat against an enemy that refused to acknowledge when they were beaten. Admiral Veldar has requested additional reinforcements from the home fleet, she noted. This marks the first time in Zephyrian military history that a pacification force has required reinforcement to subdue a single world. The political implications are significant. Nixera ended her recording with observations that would later be studied by military academies across the galaxy. We possess superior technology, overwhelming firepower, and centuries of military experience. The humans have inferior equipment, limited resources, and a laughably short lifespan. Yet they continue to fight with an intensity that suggests they believe victory is not only possible but inevitable. They possess something our databases cannot quantify or our strategists cannot counter: the absolute refusal to accept defeat as final. This may prove more dangerous than any weapon. As she finished the log, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Another human attack was beginning, and once again her people would face an enemy that turned every disadvantage into opportunity and every defeat into education. The vast crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council had never witnessed an emergency session quite like this one. Admiral Veldar stood before the assembled representatives of 47 conquered worlds, his chitinous exoskeleton dulled with exhaustion and his 4 eyes lacking their usual confident gleam. The holographic displays surrounding him painted a picture that challenged everything the Zephyrian Empire believed about warfare and conquest. "Honored Council," Veldar began, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance, "I must report that what began as a routine 3-day pacification operation has now entered its 14th month. The human resistance has not only failed to collapse but has actually strengthened with each passing day." Council Prime Zekden's massive form shifted on his ceremonial platform, his psychic emanations rippling with disbelief through the chamber's neural network. The ancient leader had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds during his long reign, and never had he heard such words from a Zephyrian admiral. "You are requesting additional fleet elements to subdue a single primitive world?" Zekden's psychic voice resonated with incredulity. "A world whose inhabitants have barely mastered interplanetary flight?" Veldar activated the holographic display, showing tactical maps of the Sol system that would have been unrecognizable to the humans who had lived there just 2 years earlier. Every asteroid, moon, and space station now bristled with defensive installations. What had once been a peaceful solar system had been transformed into the galaxy's most heavily fortified military position. "Prime, they are no longer primitive," Veldar replied, manipulating the display to show recent combat footage. "Captain Haewon Choi's engineering corps has weaponized everything in their system, including literal garbage. They launch refuse and scrap metal at our ships, but they accelerate these projectiles to 15% of light speed using stolen gravitational manipulation technology." The display showed Zephyrian vessels reeling under impacts from what appeared to be household waste and construction debris, but moving at velocities that tore through advanced hull plating like paper. The assembled council members watched in stunned silence as human fighters swarmed around massive Zephyrian dreadnoughts like angry insects, too numerous and too small for the Empire's traditional weapon systems to target effectively. "Their tactical adaptations defy all established military doctrine," Veldar continued, calling up more footage. "They have converted civilian mining equipment into ship-killing weapons. Cargo vessels have been retrofitted into fighter carriers. They use their own space stations as massive kinetic weapons, deorbiting them to ram our ships when conventional weapons fail." Council Prime Zekden's mandibles clicked in agitation as he absorbed the implications of what he was seeing. Surely their morale must be breaking under such losses. No civilized species can sustain this level of casualties indefinitely. "That is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human behavior, Prime. They fight with the intensity of a species that has already accepted death." Colonel Minho Han held Titan's orbital platform for 6 consecutive days against overwhelming odds. "When we finally breached his defenses, our boarding teams discovered he had been operating with life support systems at 12% efficiency for the final 48 hours. The holographic display showed the final moments of the Titan defense, with human soldiers continuing to fight even as their atmospheric systems failed and their weapons ran out of ammunition. Colonel Han had remained at his command post, coordinating the evacuation of civilian personnel even as Zephyrian plasma fire filled the station around him. "He could have surrendered at any time," Veldar explained. "Should have surrendered, according to all logical military calculations. Instead, he held his position long enough for every non-military person on the station to escape to safety. When we found him, he was unconscious at his console, still trying to send targeting data to the relief fleet." The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the neural network that connected all Zephyrian minds. For the first time in their collective memory, they were facing an enemy that seemed to view death as merely another tactical option rather than something to be avoided at all costs. "Commit the reserve fleets," Zekden commanded, his psychic voice carrying overtones of frustration. "End this embarrassment before word spreads to other potential rebel worlds." "There is more, Prime," Veldar said quietly, activating another set of displays. "The humans have captured 3 of our dreadnoughts completely intact, including their crews and all technical databases. Admiral Ji-Young Shin's technical teams now have complete access to our weapons systems, tactical protocols, and communication encryption codes." The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. The Zephyrian Empire's military dominance was built on technological superiority that had been carefully guarded for millennia. The idea that a primitive species now possessed their most advanced secrets was almost incomprehensible. How is this possible? Zekden's psychic emanations now carried unmistakable notes of fear. "They call it Operation Prometheus, Prime," Veldar replied, bringing up intelligence reports that painted a picture of total human mobilization. "While we have been attempting to force a quick military victory, they have been preparing their entire civilization for extended warfare. Every human settlement, every orbital facility, every asteroid mining operation has been converted to military production. The display showed factories that had been producing consumer goods now turning out ammunition and weapons. Elderly humans who should have been in retirement were operating assembly lines around the clock. Children barely old enough for education were learning orbital mechanics and tactical coordination to serve as support personnel for the military effort. Grandfather Sungmin Kim, aged 93 Earth years, personally oversees a munitions facility that produces more plasma charges daily than our entire supply fleet can deliver, Veldar reported. Children as young as 12 years serve as navigation assistants and communication operators. They have weaponized not just their military but their entire species. The final display showed Earth itself, no longer the blue and green world they had originally targeted. The planet now bristled with orbital defense platforms, surface-to-space missile installations, and manufacturing complexes that operated continuously. What had once been a peaceful civilization had transformed itself into the galaxy's most militarized society practically overnight. They are not fighting to survive this war, Prime, Veldar concluded. They are fighting to ensure they never have to fight it again. They have become persistence hunters on a galactic scale, and we have become their prey. The ancient halls of the United Nations building in Geneva had witnessed many historic moments throughout human history, but nothing quite prepared them for this day. The same assembly hall where human nations had once signed treaties to end devastating wars now hosted representatives from two different worlds, two different species, meeting to discuss the end of humanity's first interstellar conflict. Admiral Veldar's shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere with careful precision, its alien design drawing crowds of curious humans who lined the streets of Geneva to witness this unprecedented moment. The Zephyrian vessel touched down on the carefully prepared landing pad with barely a whisper, its advanced technology making the arrival seem almost effortless despite the massive weight of historical significance it carried. Inside the assembly hall, Admiral Hyunwoo Kim stood beside the long wooden table that had been used for countless diplomatic negotiations over the centuries. His uniform bore the marks of 30 months of continuous warfare, and his face showed the exhaustion of a man who had carried the weight of humanity's survival on his shoulders. Beside him stood President Taejun Lee, whose own appearance reflected the strain of leading Earth through its darkest period, and General So-young Park, whose tactical genius had helped turn the tide of what many had believed was an unwinnable war. The massive doors at the far end of the hall opened with ceremonial precision, and the Zephyrian delegation entered. Admiral Veldar led the group, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the assembly hall's lights, but his usual confident bearing was replaced by something humanity had never seen before in a Zephyrian commander: humility. Behind him walked Commander Nixera and several other high-ranking officers, their four eyes taking in every detail of human architecture and culture. The procession moved with careful dignity across the polished floor, each step echoing in the vast chamber. Representatives from dozens of human nations filled the gallery seats, watching in silent amazement as their former enemies approached the negotiation table with the careful respect of a proud species accepting something they had never experienced before: military defeat. Admiral Kim, Veldar began, his voice rendered in measured tones by the universal translator that had become humanity's bridge to understanding alien communication. The Zephyrian Empire acknowledges that continued military conflict serves the interests of neither our species. We have come to discuss the terms under which this war might be concluded. The words hung in the air for a moment, carrying with them the weight of 2.5 years of desperate fighting, countless lives lost on both sides, and the complete transformation of human civilization from a peaceful spacefaring species to the galaxy's most formidable military force. Terms of surrender, Admiral Hyunwoo Kim corrected gently, his voice carrying no trace of triumph or vindictiveness. Let's be completely clear about what we're discussing here today, Admiral Veldar. Veldar's four compound eyes dimmed slightly, an expression that Commander Nixera had learned indicated deep contemplation in her species. The alien commander stood silent for several seconds, processing not just the words but their full implications for his empire's future. Yes, he said finally, the admission clearly difficult despite its inevitability. Terms of surrender. President Taejun Lee gestured toward the document that lay on the table between them, its pages containing the formal conclusion to humanity's first interstellar war. The treaty had been carefully crafted over weeks of preliminary negotiations through diplomatic channels, and its contents represented humanity's vision for post-war relations with their former enemies. Veldar took up the document with hands that moved with careful precision, his eyes scanning the human text while his translator provided simultaneous interpretation. As he read, his expression shifted from resignation to confusion, then to something approaching amazement. These terms, he said slowly looking up from the pages, They contain no territorial demands. No requirements for tribute or reparations. No provisions for the subjugation of Zephyrian worlds or populations. You could demand our complete submission. Your military forces now possess tactical knowledge superior to our own, and you have successfully adapted and improved upon our most advanced weapon systems. Why do you offer such lenient terms? President Taejun Lee leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but not unkind. Because we never wanted to conquer your empire, Admiral. We never wanted to rule over your people or strip your worlds of their resources. What we wanted was something far more valuable and far more difficult to obtain. I do not understand, Velda replied, his translator struggling slightly with the nuances of human diplomatic language. General So-young Park spoke for the first time since the Zephyrian delegation had entered the hall. Every human culture throughout our history has understood a concept we call earned honor or earned respect. Respect that is given freely, out of fear or convenience, carries little real value. But respect that is earned through adversity, through proving your worth under the most difficult circumstances, through demonstrating your character when everything is at stake, that kind of respect is precious beyond measure. She gestured toward the alien delegation with a movement that carried no hostility, only acknowledgement of shared experience. You came to our solar system intending to conquer us. You tested our resolve, our ingenuity, our determination to remain free. Through 30 months of warfare, you learned what humanity is truly capable of when pushed to our limits. And in fighting against you, we learned that the Zephyrian Empire, despite its initial arrogance, is composed of honorable soldiers who fight with courage and dignity. The document required only 3 simple things from the Zephyrian Empire: formal recognition of Earth's sovereignty and the independence of all human colonies, establishment of official diplomatic relations between their civilizations, and a complete exchange of technological knowledge that would benefit both species in future endeavors. Admiral Veldar signed the surrender documents with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear of the future but from the profound historical weight of the moment. As he completed the final character of his signature, Admiral Hyunwoo Kim did something that would be remembered throughout galactic history. He extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship and offered something unprecedented in Zephyrian military experience. The galaxy is vast and full of mysteries, Admiral, Kim said. There are species we have both yet to encounter, challenges that neither of our civilizations could face alone. We have spent the last 30 months learning to fight each other with skill and determination. Perhaps it is time we learn to fight together as allies. In his final personal log entry, which would later be studied by xenosociologists and military historians across known space, Admiral Veldar wrote words that would define interspecies relations for generations to come. We came to the Sol system believing we would easily conquer a primitive and defenseless species. Instead, we discovered the galaxy's newest apex predator, a civilization capable of transforming itself from peaceful explorers to the most formidable military force we have ever encountered. But perhaps most remarkable of all, having proven beyond doubt that they possessed the power to destroy us completely, they chose instead to offer us friendship and alliance. The Zephyrian Empire has not merely ended a war today, we have gained the most powerful ally in galactic history. The ceremony concluded with something that had never occurred in over 2 millennia of Zephyrian military tradition. A joint honor guard composed of human and alien soldiers standing side by side, their weapons raised in salute to mark the beginning of a new chapter in galactic civilization.